It begins not with a voice, but with a sound, a sharp, piercing cry that cuts through the thin, cold air and echoes against stone. Then, out of the haze, a silhouette emerges against the vast, windswept backdrop of the Altai Mountains. It is a lone Kazakh rider, his form inseparable from his horse, a single being moving through an immense emptiness. His face, etched by 1,000 winds, is a map of a life lived under an open sky. Each line tells a story of survival, of patience, of a deep and ancient understanding. This is one of the last places where a tradition, born centuries ago, still breathes. Here, man and eagle hunt as one. The land itself is a formidable character in this story. The Altai Mountains are not a passive backdrop. They are the arbiter of life and death. They dictate the terms of existence with a brutal, indifferent beauty. The low sun casts long, blue shadows across fields of untouched snow, so vast they seem to swallow all sound. The wind is a constant sculptor, shaping the drifts, the rocks, and the very spirit of the people who call this place home. To live here is to be in a constant, silent dialogue with the earth. This is a world of immense quiet where the smallest details hold the greatest weight. The crunch of snow under a horse's hoof, the rustle of a feather in the wind, the distant shape of a fox against the horizon. It is a life measured not in hours, but in seasons, and the patient watch for prey. Perched on the hunter's gloved arm is the other half of this sacred partnership. The golden eagle is not a tool, nor is it a pet. It is family, a revered companion bound by a trust that transcends language. You can see it in the intricate golden-brown pattern of its feathers, each one perfectly aligned against the cold. And you can feel it in the fierce intelligence of its unblinking eye, which sees this landscape with a clarity we can only imagine. Its talons, curled gently on the thick leather, hold a coiled power, a potential for sudden, breathtaking action. This bond is the heart of the tradition, forged anew with every generation. But to understand how this partnership endures, we must move from the harshness of the hunt to the warmth of the hearth. Inside the circular walls of the gyr, the world changes completely. The biting wind is replaced by an intimate, enveloping warmth. The air is thick with the smells of life, mutton stew simmering over a small stove, the smoky, earthy scent of a dung fire, and the sharp tang of fermented mare's milk. Here, the grand narrative of survival is woven from small, meaningful rituals. A grandmother's hands, nimble despite their age, weaving a colorful felt rug. The soft murmur of stories passed down in the dim light. And it is here, in this sanctuary of tradition, that you see the first quiet sign of a profound change. Lying on a traditional rug, next to a bowl of dried cheese curds, is a smartphone. It's plugged into a small, portable solar charger, its screen dark for now. Its presence is not loud or disruptive. No one is looking at it. But its smooth, black form is a stark contrast to the organic textures of wool and wood that fill the space. It is an object from another world, a quiet harbinger of a future that is arriving, uninvited, in one of the most remote corners of the planet. The training begins not with a command, but with a vigil. For days and nights, the hunter sits with the newly captured eaglet, a sentinel, in the vast quiet. He does not sleep. He simply remains, a constant, steady presence, allowing the bird to learn his shape, his scent, his very stillness. This is the first lesson in a language of patience, spoken in the heart of the Altai Mountains. He feeds the young predator from his own gloved hand, tearing small pieces of meat and offering them gently. He sings to it low and rhythmic melodies that have been passed down through generations. The songs are not for his own comfort, but for the eagles, a vibration, a sound that slowly replaces the fear of capture with the familiarity of a new companion. It is a profound act of trust-building, a deliberate dismantling of the wall between wildness and kinship. This is not about breaking a spirit, but about forging a partnership. It is an understanding between two hunters, an agreement that one will be the eyes from the sky and the other the anchor to the earth. We see this bond passed on, a quiet inheritance. An aging hunter, his face etched by 100 windswept winters, guides his teenage son's arm. He shows him not how to command, but how to support the immense weight of the golden eagle. The lesson is in the subtle shift of balance, the feel of the powerful talons gripping the leather. The father's words are few, a quiet murmur against the wind. The real teaching happens in this shared space, in the silent observation of how the bird adjusts its feathers, how its gaze scans the horizon. The weight on the boy's arm is more than just the bird. It is the weight of a lineage, a responsibility to a world that is vanishing. Later, we find that same son alone inside the gear. The ancient world is held at bay by the small, glowing screen in his hands. His thumb flicks across images not of the steppe, but of the city. A world of paved streets and bright electric lights. The screen shows young men his age in fashionable jackets, leaning against cars, laughing in cafes in Ulji. It's a life that seems impossibly distant and yet right here in his palm. It promises a different kind of warmth, a different kind of future. A message flashes on the screen. It's from a cousin who left the mountains last year. It speaks of a job, of wages paid in cash, of a life where survival isn't a daily contest against the elements. The lure is not just money, but a sense of belonging to the modern world. There is another, more subtle threat at work here. An elder hunter, his eyes narrowed against the glare, points a weathered finger to a distant, stony ridge. He remembers when the snows would arrive earlier and stay longer, blanketing these peaks in a deep, reliable white. That certainty is gone. The winters are milder, the thaws unpredictable. This changes everything. The foxes and hares that the eagles hunt have changed their patterns, moving to higher, more remote grounds where the cold still lingers. The hunt has become a search for something that is slowly disappearing, a quiet erosion of the very landscape that defines their existence. The end of this tradition is not a sudden, violent event. There is no great battle being lost, no single villain to blame. It is a quiet erosion, like wind wearing down a mountain over 1,000 years. It is the slow, steady pressure of a world that has less and less room for such things. This erosion happens in 1,000 small, practical decisions that seem reasonable on their own. It is a son choosing the steady wage of a coal mine over the uncertainties of the hunt. It is the international market for fur collapsing, turning a vital source of income into a hobby. It is a winter that arrives late, or a snowfall that is too thin, making the tracks of the fox impossible to follow. Each small change, each logical choice, is a single grain of sand falling away from the cliff face, and over time, the entire landscape is altered, almost without anyone noticing the moment it happened. Now, there are festivals. The eagle hunters gather, dressed in their most magnificent wolfskin coats, their birds perched proudly, their feathers preened to perfection. They ride before crowds of tourists, their large camera lenses following every move. It is a spectacular display of an ancient skill, a vibrant performance of a deep culture. There is pride here and pageantry, but the context has shifted. The hunt, once a silent dialogue between man, bird, and the vast, unforgiving land, has become a competition for prizes. The skills are preserved, but they are being encased in the amber of spectacle, a way of life becoming a living museum exhibit. This story, however, does not belong only to the Altai Mountains. It is an echo of a loss felt all across our world. It is the story of the last person who can speak a language, the final artisan who knows how to weave a certain pattern, the last elder who remembers the songs that map the stars. When a tradition like this fades, it is not just the Kazakh people who lose something. A unique way of seeing the world, a form of human knowledge honed over centuries, is extinguished. A thread is pulled from the great tapestry of our shared human story, leaving a space that can never be rewoven. And so we find ourselves back in the vast, windswept landscape, watching the lone rider against the sky. But we see him differently now. He is no longer a timeless figure, but a fragile one, perhaps one of the last. The golden eagle on his arm seems heavier now, not with its own weight, but with the weight of a world that is disappearing. It is a beautiful, profound burden. And the wind that whips across the steppe carries more than just the cold. It carries a lingering question of what we all lose when an echo like this finally goes silent. In the quiet moments after a hunt or during the long winter evenings, a different kind of bond is forged. It is here, around a fire, that the stories are told. Not grand epics, but small, vital lessons. The way a certain fox circled back, the feel of the wind just before a snow, the subtle sign of a healthy eagle. This is the glue that holds their world together. This shared knowledge is a living thing, passed from one to another not in books, but in gestures, in the tone of a voice, in a shared glance across a windswept plain. It is a language understood without words, an inheritance of instinct and observation. A man mends his glove, the leather worn smooth by the grip of a lifetime, and shows a younger hunter how to stitch it just so to withstand the cold and the strain. Yet in these circles of warmth, a new light sometimes appears. The small blue glow of a smartphone, held in a young hand. The eyes that look into it are seeing a different world, one of cities, of cars, of lives that do not depend on the whims of the weather or the flight of a fox. It's a quiet, almost imperceptible shift. The lure isn't just the novelty. It's the promise of a different kind of survival, a life where education leads to a steady job, where warmth comes from a radiator, not a carefully tended fire. The ancient skills, so vital for survival in the Altai Mountains, have little currency in that other world. And that world is calling to them, a siren song of stability. This creates a silent, painful choice. To stay is to honor the ancestors, to live a life of profound connection to the land and the sky. To leave is to seek a future for one's own children, a life with fewer hardships. There is no villain in this story, only the relentless pull of a changing world against the deep roots of tradition. And so, the hunts themselves begin to change. Where once a group of brothers and cousins might have ridden out together, covering vast territory, now a lone figure is more common. The collective wisdom is fragmented. The hunt becomes less a communal ritual and more a solitary struggle against the odds. An old hunter might pause on a ridge, his eagle patient on his arm, and scan the horizon. He remembers when other figures would have been silhouetted against the sky, fellow hunters moving in a coordinated ancestral dance. Today, the landscape is empty. The silence is no longer just the peace of the mountains. It holds a note of absence. The relationship extends beyond the eagle. It encompasses the entire ecosystem. The hunters understand the patterns of the prey, the health of the grasslands, the subtle shifts that signal a hard winter. They are not just taking from the land, they are its stewards, its readers, its memory keepers. When they leave, a vital chapter of that land's story is erased. The ecological balance, maintained for centuries through this intimate relationship, begins to fray. It is a loss that the mountains feel, even if they cannot speak of it. The wind carries a different story now, one of imbalance and forgotten knowledge. The tradition, then, is not simply vanishing. It is being stretched thin, pulled apart by forces both internal and external. It survives in the hearts of the few who remain, a flickering ember against a gathering storm. Its future is not a clear path, but a question whispered on the wind-swept steppes.